Say hello because I could be on the first day. My name is Éva Kovacs and I represent the other colleagues here in the Vienna Wiesenthal Institute for Holocaust Studies and we were co-organization of this very, very interesting work. But now I have another task because we have another panel which is a panel of the newest developments of transnational history writing and presenting the history of Roma Holocaust and Roma genocide. Two research groups will present very, very new fundings. Karola Fings and her research group, and László, Csősz, and his research group. So Karola is a historian, the head of the project Encyclopaedia of the Nazi genocide of the Sinti and Roma in European in Europe, at the Research Center of Antiziganismus and at the Department of History at Heidelberg University. She created this section, Voices of the Victims in Roma Archive. Maybe all of you know this initiative, which was very, very interesting and important still. And was a member of the Independent Commission on Anti-Gypsyism of the General Federal Government from in German General Federal Government from 2019 and 2021. And Karola had a long career in the city of Cologne between 2001 and 2020, so 19 years. She was a research assistant, from the research assistant to the deputy director of the city of Cologne Documentation Center on National Socialism. Her work focuses on the National Socialist genocide of Sinti and Roma in Europe, anti-Gypsyism, and the aftermath of Nazi crimes. She has been responsible for numerous research, exhibitions, and publication projects. And Sarah Kleinmann is a historian and cultural anthropologist. She's a research assistant for the project Encyclopaedia of the Nazi genocide of the Sinti and Roma in Europe, and the Research Center on Anti-Gypsyism at the Department of History at the Heidelberg University. Previously, she was employed at the German Institute for Human Rights and worked for the Independent Commission on Anti-Gypsyism from 2019 to 2021. From 2015 to 2029, she was also a research assistant at the Institute of Saxon History and Cultural Anthropology in Dresden. So the floor is yours, and then
Yes, thank you very much for your wonderful introduction and for the invitation to this conference. We will start right now. Yes. Well, where's here time? I want to avoid to get any pressure. That's fine. Yeah. Okay. Well, some of you and a lot of you already know the frame of this project. It is located at the Research Center on Anti-Gypsyism at the University of Heidelberg. It started in July 2020. We are going to go online with the Encyclopaedia by the end of 2023. It will be online in German and English, and the printed version will be published in German only by the end of 2025, and it's funded by the German Federal Foreign Office. We have some partners in Germany and in Austria. These are all institutions that deal with Holocaust, Roma genocide. For example, the Fritz Bauer Institute in Frankfurt am Main. It's the only department of history at a German university where Holocaust studies are done. And for the Foundation Memorial to the Murdered Jews of Europe, they are responsible also for the memorial to the Roma genocide of the Roma. And we have a wonderful scientific council for the project. These are all scholars who publish on Holocaust, on occupation policy, or on National Socialism. and they are all experts in their field, and I'm very happy that we have this really high scientific frame. Éva already mentioned the project Voices of the Victims, and this was indeed the starting point for the Encyclopaedia. When without Voices of the Victims, I would never dare to do this really somehow very, very complex project. Well, we collected their sources, first-person testimonies written in the time of the persecution or shortly after the liberation for 20 countries, and I had a wonderful team of 14 experts for these 20 countries. Some of them you know, and they are with us here. Of course, the role model for the Encyclopedia of the Genocide of Sinti and Roma in Europe is the Encyclopedia of the Holocaust. It was published it was done by Yad Vashem. It was published in the English version in 1990, and in 1993 the German version appeared. And while working on Voices of the Victims, I thought we need to gather all our knowledge we have about the European persecution. And therefore, I thought that this would be a suitable format to do this. And as I was in contact with a lot of colleagues all over Europe and in other countries, I thought, well, why not give it a try and let's start. You know the starting points, no attention, no recognition, no research for these states, and only the Roma civil rights movement since the 1970s, not only in Germany, but also international, put this topic on the agenda. We have a lot of milestones to name, but I would only focus here on the permanent exhibition on the grounds of the Auschwitz Memorial. The opening was in 2001. And of course, the inauguration of the Center Memorial in Berlin in 2012. The academic research I intensified since the 1990s only, but still the quality, the breadth, and the depth of the state of research are extremely heterogeneous for the European countries. We lack primary sources on the one hand, much has been destroyed, but as Milvan yesterday also pointed out, and I would also make this point very strong, empirical research has not done enough, and we still, colleagues who work in the archives know this, there's still a lot of not identified documents all over Europe. So why an encyclopedia? Our existing knowledge is highly fragmented and often only accessible via remotely published literature, and who of us, to be honest, knows the Finnish language, or sorry, the Hungarian, or others. And we have still research gaps for numerous countries and persecution contexts and crime complexes. And therefore, the format of an encyclopedia is particularly suitable for presenting a heterogeneous and incomplete body of knowledge. And the encyclopedia will be a reference work of the existing knowledge in alphabetical and systematic order. That's why we are all working on. And here are some notes on the aims of the encyclopedia. We want to deepen our knowledge. We want to stimulate further research. We want to contribute to a deepening and source-based expansion of the discourse of remembrance. We want to reach a broad public. We want to contribute to the combat of contemporary anti-Gypsyism. The encyclopedia will be a dignified symbol for the acknowledgement of the genocide, and it should be a gesture of recognition, not only for the victims, but also for their descendants. Well, I looked around in how we can put up these online encyclopedia, and I found the International Encyclopedia of the First World War online. It's really a huge and fantastic project. It's based on open encyclopedia systems, and they have a lot of interesting features. For example, these timelines, or here another project that was made on the basis of open encyclopedia systems. Here they structure the knowledge not only from A to Z, but also after rubrics. And that's why we have the Center for Digital Systems of the FVAHT University as a cooperation partner with us, and we work together with them to establish these online formats. Well, we will structure our information from A to Z also, and we have a timeline, and of course all indices we need, but also the structure of the lemmas, the dictionary entries by rubrics. They allow a really direct entrance to various contents, for example, like spaces, countries, regions, and places, crime scenes, or internments, camps, ghettos, and murder sites, the persecution system, institutions, persons, concepts, laws, and various topics like a glossary from anti-Gypsyism to psychology. And of course, we have a certain rubric about life paths of Sinti and Roma, and the aftermath will also play a role. And now I think I give over to Sarah.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, hello again. Now I'm happy to share with you some further insights. Here's a working meeting. You can see Karola and me and our colleagues from CEDIS at the Freie-Universität Berlin. And also prominently in the picture is the backend of the online encyclopedia. This is the editorial working environment, which is currently in the test phase, so to say. And as part of a grant from the German Research Foundation, the open source platform Karola just mentioned, OES, Open Encyclopedia System, was developed at Freie-Universität Berlin for the creation and operation of online encyclopedias. The OES data model for the encyclopedia we are currently working on can be seen here, can be seen by you, and the versioning of the lemmas, which enables continuous updates, and the work with indices are clearly visible on the slides. In 2021, we've set up 11 interdisciplinary working groups on various European countries, whose members write lemmas for the encyclopedia, and many of them are here in the room, many of our wonderful authors. And many of the members of these working groups, they are renowned historians who conduct empirical research, but also social scientists are involved, and young researchers have been invited to participate in this project in the working groups. And in addition to the working groups, with several people involved, there are also those in which we work together with individuals. As you can see here, that's the case concerning Islam, for example. Yeah, working group meetings are usually held online, and here's a screenshot of the meeting, of one of the meetings of the Yugoslavia working group.
Seriously showing this?
Yeah. So, and another insight here in the picture, you can see the working group on France with our wonderful colleagues who do research on persecution in France.
And at the evening, you know.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And 7 more working groups are going to be established this year and in the next year, and they focus on the countries, which you can also see on the slide. The list of lemmas we have compiled currently comprises several hundred entries and is continuously updated. And here you can see an excerpt with some lemmas in which, for example, the German and English titles, the different rubrics, and the connection of different contents within the encyclopedia can be seen. And of course, we also want and need to and have to take up ethical and epistemological questions. And here you can see a quote from one of our handouts for authors, which makes clear that the conception and development of the encyclopedia follows an anti-racist approach. Of course, we do not understand racism as an individual prejudice, but as a classification system and social practice that also has a historically developed structural and institutional dimension. And furthermore, our anti-racist approach is also one that is anti-Semitic gender sensitive, etc., i.e. intersectional and multi-perspective. Furthermore, we know about the historic burdens on the system of science in the context of the dialectic of the European Enlightenment. And even more than that, we know about the huge responsibility of science and of scientists for the persecution of Sinti and Roma and for the genocide. So the demand of the Independent Commission on Anti-Gypsyism, which was set up by the German federal government from 2019 to 2021, that, quote, change of perspective and paradigm in science and research is overdue, is therefore part of our research ethical self-conception. Our project also operates in the awareness of the second persecution after 1945, of course, and in the knowledge of today's historical revisionist attempts to deny the National Socialist crimes and the crimes of actors allied with Germany and the Second World War. So the Encyclopaedia thus also aims to contribute to cultural memory, which is part of collective memory, according to Maurice Alpers, is always socially mediated but contested. So, what else? The anti-racist approach also includes, firstly, a constant critical and research ethical reflection on scientific practice. Neither of us belong to the communities of Sinti and Roma. We necessarily reflect on this point, and our experience can never be the experiences of those with whom we are dealing in the research. We take the standpoint that we too bear responsibility for coming to terms with the crimes, and that research on those affected by genocidal crimes is at best research conducted together with those affected. Secondly, this anti-racist approach includes the use of language that is sensitive to racism and power relations or other power relations. So we work on painful experiences, on the extermination of entire families and other social groups, on famine and other crimes. And we take this into account strongly in terms of language. This includes, for example, not using racist language. Racist terms are avoided or analytically classified. And accordingly, we avoid othering. So we don't use essentializing under complex attributions, such like, or could be terms like nomadic or sedentary. And in addition, analytical distance is created from the inhuman, deeply ideologized lingua tertii imperii, language of the Third Reich, as Victor Klemperer has pointed out. And if it's legally possible and the state of research permits it, we will also mention the names of those affected in lemmas of the encyclopedia, i.e. say their names, in order to honor them and to avoid exclusively publishing the names of the perpetrators. Third, this anti-racist approach includes a careful critical contextualization of written and visual sources. This should be a matter of course for historians, for any historian, and source criticism is part of the basic equipment of historiographical methodology. In accordance with the anti-racist approach of our project, especially the perspectives of perpetrators are carefully contextualized in the lemmas. And historical visual material that has a value as historical source will generally be used. Preferably, the lemmas in the section in the rubric Life Path should be equipped with images, such as, for example, artistic self-testimonies or written self-testimonies and non-stereotypical photographs that respect the dignity of those depicted. Images from the perspective of perpetrators have to be avoided, or if they are important for the understanding, they have to be contextualized, and images with an anti-gypsy gaze are non-desirable. Fourthly, this anti-racist approach includes a conceptual design of the lemmas which reflects this critical approach to racism. And the specific conceptual design includes, for example, that we have developed, as Karola just mentioned, 5 rubrics, which the lemmas of the encyclopedia belong. And the rubric Life Path includes biographies of Sinti and Roma. And these lemmas are intended to show the heterogeneity of the communities, and the special focus of the content is on agency. For example, resistance, art production, important testimonies, or the political fight for recognition. And agency is also an important and indispensable topic in those lemmas that provide an overview of persecution in the 30 European countries we would like to address with this encyclopedia. So the topics of resistance and self-assertion are thus central focal points. The encyclopedia will furthermore contain short texts on selected perpetrators in order to name responsibility and enable symbolic accusation, but this text should be as brief as possible in order to avoid bias towards perpetrator representation. And another important point is that we work with Romani authors and that we are in contact with self-organization around this project we're currently working on. And then I just would like to show you some people who are to be honored in separate independent lemmas in the rubric life path that are shown here. For example, Kleinmann, who was murdered in the Neuengamme concentration camp, and others.
2 minutes left. Yeah,
right?
2.5.
2.5. Oh, that's a lot. So challenges and opportunities. Well, we have no budget for new research, but we are, of course, we want to base it all on scientific evidence. We will make scattered knowledge accessible. We show where we have still gaps. We stimulate research also in a comparative perspective, and new knowledge can be made accessible within a short time. And the dynamics of persecution, the persecution practices all over Europe, and the dimension of the genocide will become visible. We will create a new map of crimes, Nazi crimes against Roma and Sinti all over Europe. This is a quite common map about the genocide. It is shown also in the Auschwitz memorial in this huge exhibition. It was done by the German Council on Sinti and Roma in Heidelberg, and I think our project will add a lot of very important information. For example, in occupied France, we have not only the camps de nomades, the camps, the local camps, but also the internments in several cities. And of course, not a lot of people know that also in France there had been massacres by the end of the war in 44-45. Roma had been victims, for example, of the massacres done by the SS division, the Reich. The same applies to Italy, where we have the internments and the banishments, but also massacres in 43 and 45. And if you take a look to the Middle and Eastern Europe, of course, the situation is even worse. If you see here the two maps, they symbolize, on the one hand, 180 places of massacres in the general government we know about, and we will, of course, represent them somehow in this encyclopedia. I think it's really important that we collect all information we have, be they as short as they are. And of course, for the Ukraine, we have more than 140 places of massacres, and our aim in the encyclopedia is really to represent all these atrocities. And of course, there are blank spaces, and this is my last presentation here. What is about Spain? What did Roma do in the Civil War? What were they refugees going to France and then deported? I know that several of these French deportees or Spaniards, French deportees on the Channel Islands at Alderney were Roma. For example, or Great Britain, what do we know about Roma in the Royal Air Force, for example? Albania, Greece, were Roma also victims of the massacres that took place there under German occupation? What's about Turkey, where we know a lot of Jews fled to Turkey? They were safe in this immigration, but we know about Roma families that fled from Germany to Turkey, but were expelled under the pressure of the German government, and then were taken to Niš and afterwards to Auschwitz-Birkenau and killed. and what happened in Luxembourg. Did anyone had been deported from there? So these are some questions, but to sum it up, we are on the way. We are optimistic. We have wonderful colleagues. Our network of the Encyclopaedia is growing. And whoever thinks he could contribute, he or she could contribute to this huge project, while you are invited. Thank you.
Karola and Sarah, and now the floor is yours. László, just a very short introduction, because I think we know László, almost all of you. László Csősz is a historian at the National Archives of Hungary, and also a lecturer of a claims conference project on Holocaust studies at the Yale University. László published a lot of books, if I remember correctly, 7 books, some of them with co-authors in English on the history of the Hungarian Holocaust. So he is one of the decent historians of the topic, and this is a kind of excursion in his life to something in the field of Romani genocides. And the project was supported by the IDA. But I also wanted to mention that László is a veteran of the European Holocaust research infrastructure. So he's really working since more than 12 years on the international cooperation and the knowledge production of the history of the Holocaust. So László, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Éva, for the wonderful introduction and also the invitation to this conference, where I have already learned a lot. And also thanks for the technical help. Mapping the genocide of the Roma in Hungary is an archival and educational project of the National Archives of Hungary, funded by the IRA, the Hungarian state, and also partly by the Austrian Ministry of Education, Science and Research. And the team of archivists, scholars, and educators are working on a multimedia online portal which is dedicated to safeguard the record of the genocide of the Roma in Hungary. So here we have all partner institutions from Austria, Slovakia, and Hungary. And if everything goes as planned, we are planning to go online in November this year with the portal. So the key content of the portal should be an interactive map visualizing technically all memorial sites, including collection and labor camps, killing sites, burial sites, memorials, and routes of forced marches in the wartime territory of Hungary. And we try to identify, digitize, and utilize the largely unexplored archival sources on the topic, and offer a digital catalog of selection of the records, not all of them, but a broad selection from state archives, not only in Hungary, but also in the neighboring countries, with archival descriptions to facilitate further research. The portal also incorporates images, glossaries, a timeline of events, providing a comprehensive account of the Roma genocide in Hungary, including its origins and aftermath, and its spatial, cultural, political memory. And educational materials will be also created and integrated, making the portal useful for educators. And furthermore, we also develop databases of victims. Our research primarily focuses on the last phase of the war, I mean the center of the persecution of the Roma, and it includes various very important topics, and I would like to present very briefly the main phases of the persecution of the Roma, which includes the so-called bureaucratic anti-Gypsyism, which was already there. Of course, as we know, we heard yesterday that anti-Gypsyism was not born with Antonescu and did not die with Antonescu, and that was the same for Miklos Horthy's regime as well. So it was not only responsible for anti-Roma policy and politics. And I mean by bureaucratic anti-Gypsyism, might need an explanation that instead of governmental and ministerial decrees and laws about the Roma, mostly local statutes determined the so-called Gypsy policy. It means actual implementation largely depended on the discretion of civil administration and law enforcement agencies on the local level. And there was a broad scope of local statutes and initiatives, and the lack of coherent legal framework allowed actually the authorities to discriminate further against citizens they considered Roma Gypsies by racial or social criteria, and it spurred further unlawful excesses, as we will see during the course of war. And the second very important step was the introduction of military labor service and forced labor for the Roma, and thousands were toiled away to perform forced labor in agriculture and infrastructural projects, and also recruited for the Hungarian army as unarmed labor servicemen. It was a very important indicator at the time of the loyalty of a certain ethnic group, and it's remarkable that until August 1944, Roma could serve as armed soldiers in the Hungarian army, but from this time on they were increasingly moved to unarmed labor service companies. And under the rule of the pro-Nazi Aerocross regime, the persecution of the Roma intensified, as you know very well, and they started mass deportations centering in the Starfort in Komárom and the Ulak brickyards in Budapest, and thousands of Roma were deported to various Nazi concentration camps. And then followed the final phase when, with Hungary moving to the epicenter of the war in late summer 1944, anti-Roma policies and attitudes altered rapidly, and with the Soviet army approaching the Hungarian borders, nationalist hysteria and fears intensified, and certain Roma groups were targeted, I quote, as risks of national security. And the first such massacre happened in Salonta, Romania, today on October 12, 1944, when after the recapture of the town from the advancing Red Army, Hungarian army personnel executed 18 Roma men for alleged collaboration with the Soviets. And according to the witness testimony of Erzsébet Tinka, 15 at the time, on that very day, Roma women and children.
Semmit, csak a kutatásainkat elmondja.
Okay, thank you for the comment. Women and children were spared. However, the grounded fears and traumas of the population, mixed with existing anti-Roma sentiments and intensified by Aerocross media and propaganda, soon led to a so-called cumulative radicalization. Many Roma individuals were executed under the fluid categories of deserters, irresponsible and dangerous elements, and traitors. And in this period, often entire communities
including women and children, were exterminated for purely racist motivations. These brutal retaliatory actions and mass executions claimed at least 500 lives from early October to April at 10 major sites and several other locations. And I made a draft map on which, for the way of comparison, you see also the atrocities and killing sites against the Jews in the same period and the same territory, and the green spots, of course, the major execution sites against Roma. And it would be interesting to analyze actually the territorial division of those events. I don't have time for that, but it was very much connected to the military operations and the front lines, as you can see on the map. And there were 10 of those, and we have also the Komar collection camp on the map. And in the case of Arrow-Cross crimes against the Jews, retribution followed the crimes with exceptional swiftness. As we know, the first war criminals were hanged in the west side of the capital on February the 3rd, 1945, while the battle was still raging at the other part of the city. And the reorganized Hungarian authorities promptly started to collect evidence on the crimes. However, it was, in the case of the Roma, it was sharply different. And those acts were late or completely forgotten. And here we have an exception. We have an example for that. For example, in Dobos, Hungarian soldiers and local gendarmerie killed 20 Roma men, women, and children, and the perpetrators were put on trial in 1956. And the verdict, I quote, stated, "This horrible crime has come to light only after more than a decade." However, if we take a look at the archival evidence, for example, this letter or statement of a local Roma who is presenting evidence on the murder of his relatives, it's quite clear that this evidence was available for the authorities already in 1945. So it's really interesting to note this. And as for the research findings and challenges of the project, we collected archival records in more than 20 archives in Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, and Ukraine. And so far we have 1,700 files, which is one of the largest Roma-related archival collections in the region, I think, which includes administrative records, post-war trial records, and also German compensation files. And we have to add in this context that in all of this we can find not only perpetrator documents, but also testimonies and ego documents, which is key to us. And then we try to collect footage from state and private photo archives in Hungary, and so far we have hundreds of photographs on our radar. And obviously we try to utilize family private collections whatever is possible, and especially during the COVID, when we couldn't go to archives, we were doing research in the ITS database for Roma victims and survivors. And this is the last very important cohort. And on the portal, we create an integrated database for these archival records.
databases of victims and collect obviously scholarly literature and press material as well. And as for the challenges of the project, first of all, we have a time frame, which is a problem. Unlike in the case of the Holocaust, we cannot create like a concise time frame for the Roma genocide, because I already mentioned that discrimination, anti-Roma practices go back even to the liberal Austro-Hungarian era, and continued in the interwar period, and they, of course, wouldn't stop after 1945 either. Another challenge is the development of educational materials, especially with regard to testimonies, and we could identify many written testimonies, but still it's our task to find more oral history collection, especially which are available in private collections. And also, I have to mention that the identification of Roma genocide documents can be especially problematic. Of course, not impossible, but because of the specific time frame, there was a large-scale destruction of evidence, and therefore Roma-related sources are of diverse, scattered, and fragmented nature, and it's posing specific challenges for researchers and archivists alike. On the long run, the project has a potential to mitigate the infrastructural shortcomings of genocide research in Hungary and its underrepresentation in education. It would or could create kind of a hub of transnational scholarly research, education, and civil activism, provide a basis for a central integrated database for Roma genocide research in Central Europe, to extend it to other countries. And also, it's very important, I think, facilitate the integration of Roma history into Holocaust historiography, into national history and commemoration, and also even to Roma collective memory, and that's why I think it's so important. And here I wanted to also mention one issue of public memory and commemoration at the very end of my presentation, that despite efforts by scholars and educators in the last decades, the fate of the Roma still underrepresented in commemoration, scholarship, and education. And the memorial events in Hungary are very strongly centered around the International Roma Genocide Day, and it's of course very important for civil activism, identity, and solidarity, but this approach also somehow overshadows events that took place in Hungary, as well as the specificities of the Hungarian chapter of the genocide and the Hungarian complicity. And also, this remembrance is pretty much Budapest-centered, despite the rural character of genocide. And the local provincial killing sites are often unmarked, not properly remembered or forgotten, and therefore safeguarding this lieu de mémoire, places of memory of the genocide, and moving the focus of remembrance to the provinces, it's important. And also perhaps we should consider establishing a Memorial Day, another Memorial Day in the early days of November, commemorating the start of the mass deportations and it should be among our priorities. I think I would like to finish with this image here. Thank you very much.
This was my failure, so I made a coffee break before this panel, which means that we have now 15 minutes to discuss the two presentations and a shorter coffee break, but two coffee breaks. So, oh, wow. So, okay. So we will make two collections. Okay, this is the first, the right way, and then the left. Go ahead.
Two very quick questions.
Sure.
30 years have passed since the Holocaust Encyclopedia came out. And what are the lessons that you learned from that? So what are you not doing in this encyclopedia? What are sort of the cautionary tales from that first encyclopedia? Something with the Goodman encyclopedia that came out in 1990. And the other one is for László. What this is a national project, and to what extent are there cooperations with? Are there similar kinds of projects in neighboring countries that you're connecting with, integrating with? Or is this really focused only on the wartime Hungary?
No, we collect. Sorry.
Yeah,
You?
okay, so first, I don't know if she's still here, Louisa Medland, that made the last panel, but just to make a point that I thought very interesting that she brought psychological patterns inside of social science in a way that she's identified through the Holocaust symptoms of PTSD that was analyzed already in psychoanalysis with veterans of war. But bringing this inside of Roma communities is very interesting because people are still facing these sort of traumas, and so maybe to a way around to try to see the symptoms of the trauma and try to create new categories for identify marginalization. But so I just thought very interesting images here. Yeah. And the other point is regarding this presentation is yes, because there is this is important to pay attention in epistemological approach or understanding, like for example when it's mentioned anti-black discrimination, but also the empirically result. So in this sense, how this encyclopedia can be like accessible, how the knowledge in the encyclopedia can be accessible through different platforms of explore the media or explore the data, or how this can be, or if there is thought about like how to
Thank you.
This yeah, and sorry, but there is also yes. So the National Archive in Hungary. So the Roma activist spaces in Hungary is very yes, and so there is collaboration also with like activists how to use this archive material in the field, like how this can like in some sort of collaboration between this kind of archive material and these spaces in Hungary.
Thank you.
And then I.
First of all, a very short comment to Karola's and Sarah's presentation, which I found wonderful. And I would like just to share an experience with the digital archive of the Roma archive, the Voices of the Victims section, which for me was a cathartic experience because at some points when the private letters are read and when the word gypsy appears in the original letter, you can see, you can hear on the soundtrack Roma and Sinti. And I called it a silence act instead of a speech act, which is a wonderful experience, I think. So that's just a comment. And a short question to László. Where is the place of the very rich film heritage connected to the Roma Holocaust in the archive, if there is? And also the existing research material, like the János Bársony, Ágnes Daróci, and Ágota Varga. So if they embrace or integrate this research material or not. Thank you.
Aggie?
My question was also about the resources.
Yes. And the
And she asked
earlier initiatives, yes. So then start with the first one.
Yes, okay. Thank you for the question. Well, it will be a totally different encyclopedia, of course. You had a research status 30 years ago, and I refer more to the German edition of the Encyclopedia of the Holocaust. It was revised and rewritten quite a lot compared to the original English edition. And here you see that the research was not as balanced as we have it today. We have a lot of more findings about the Holocaust in Eastern Europe, for example. You can't find a lot there. And about certain crimes and so on. So it's the children of its time, and we are in a new time, and we have other problems to represent, of course, the atrocities, because we have a lot of holes, gaps. So we will see. And in terms of the accessibility, of course, it's an online platform. We have it in English and in German, the Encyclopedia. And we also have the possibility to, well, this is the ongoing debate between us, that we try to put our new information in existing platforms of knowledge, for example, the German Normdatei, German Norm data, or the Library of Congress subject headings, so that we, via the Encyclopedia, can try to change the hegemonistic view on this topic. Can I add something?
This is something we would like to push on in the future, to maybe to reach some changes in this norm data copula, but we will see if this is possible. But maybe I should add that the printed version of the encyclopedia will also be published online as open access file, so that you don't have to buy it, for example. You can access it easily online. And of course, all the files, they will be barrierefrei, so that just people can read it, no matter which needs they have or how they can read it. This is also an important point. Yeah, and translations, we hope to develop this further. There are more languages. And let's see, also concerning the funding, what is going to be possible.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I think this is a crucial epistemological question. If you are producing an encyclopedia, it's a kind of basic communal activity. So it's not an authorship is questionable. The question is whether you can make it even more participatory.
Yeah.
So having other authorships or other different participation logic, and in a written version it's totally difficult. But László, what do you think about it? So what about the earlier research sources and materials? How can you put it in a democratic way in this website?
You know, I would say we are planning to create a hub of research, activism, and education. So I would like to stress again, this is an archival project, and this is an educational project. This is not cutting-edge academic research. Maybe if it was not clear, and I'm really sorry for that. And obviously, we know previous research, and we integrate all the information available from previous literature, and that's why I mentioned we have a very detailed annotated bibliography at the portal, and we would be happy to make them directly accessible if a digital version is available, for example, and it goes without saying we know them very well. And when we started the project, we tried hard to create a network of local art activists, experts who are also working for our project or provided material. Sometimes we were not successful. For example, in the case of Agota Varga, we were not successful because she demanded money quite a lot for her materials, and we couldn't find the sources. There was no money for that at the project budget, of course. But in most of the cases, we were successful, and those people are supporting us, working with us, and we would like to integrate everything, obviously. And as for being an international project, this is just a dream for the future. Obviously, it would be far beyond the scope of the present project to be international. So we are focusing on the wartime territory of Hungary, but we should remember that the Holocaust and also the genocide of the Roma in Hungary is a shared story of 8 nations, eight countries, and so it cannot be like separated. So we must cooperate with colleagues in other countries. So everybody is of course welcome to join and cooperate with us.
And at the second round, so let's go.
Yeah, I'm just going to stand up because I can't actually see the speaker. Sorry. Thanks for your presentations. I had a small comment and then a question about your anti-racist approach, which I think is the first time we've heard the historian in this conference describe their approach in specific terms. I think I wanted to make this comment in relation to Petra's presentation as well. I think the gap in knowledge that is often so there's a comparison, right? Like the Jewish part of the history was recorded much earlier, and then Roma part of the history was recorded later. I think this needs to be qualified. It didn't just happen in a vacuum that the Roma part of knowledge making came later. It happened because in the Romanian case, there were persecutions during the communist time as well. You know, it didn't just happen that there was nobody interested. And then I think it's really important to qualify the difference between community-based knowledge and academic knowledge. Just because there wasn't a paper on it doesn't mean people didn't know about it. That's just a comment for kind of how we frame knowledge gaps. And then regarding your anti-racist approach, I mean, my question is, I have 2 questions. How do you negotiate it with the researchers in the project? Like, how did you come about saying, okay, this is our anti-racist approach, this is our principles, now you do this with our principles, or did you come up with it together? Because over lunch yesterday, I had a conversation with Petra and also László where I said that in my own work, I don't translate the Romanian racial slur for Roma with an English racial slur. I translate it as Roma, and I make it clear that it is my choice as the translator that I use this word. And both Petra and László were saying that it's kind of historically inaccurate to do so. So, but for me, that would be an anti-racist approach to this kind of work. So I wonder how you negotiate these questions in the frame of kind of positivistic historiography, because if we're going to be positivist about it, then we can't say we're anti-racist about it at the same time. So yeah, how do you kind of negotiate that knowledge politics?
Thank you.
Yes, actually you go first, please.
Yeah,
It's okay, she can go first because, yeah.
okay, thank you so much. Yeah, I have in fact technical question and also comment. So as I understood well, it's a new encyclopedia, an online one about Roma and Holocaust Sinti, no, if I am not mistaken. And it's a bit related with Mina's question. So it's a new project, okay? It's an online platform. I mean, it's a really good idea. I want to really thank you because we'll have this accessible encyclopedia. But just asking, I mean, how researchers came and worked together because I don't know, for example, I think it's really important to for this kind of project, it's really important to have also Roma and non-Roma to work together for having different approaches, and also anti-racist, of course, gays. And Andrew, for example, from Romania, I have to be honest, I didn't see anybody who is Roma, and I think are really great researchers, the researchers from your presentation from Romania. But I think it's really important to have this approach in any project, because even if maybe they are, I know they aren't the best one. I mean, they maybe they didn't do the best interviews, or I don't know, but it's really important to have also this voice and this approach, because I mean and also in a minute, and also about this I mean this approach in interviews, this ethical approach, because I don't know, if interview is made by a Romani woman, maybe with a Romani woman, maybe we can discover other things if it's made by a non-Roma man, for example. So it's really important for me, for example, to have this approach. I mean, now I speak as a Romani woman, not an academic. Yeah. So thank you very much.
I want to put a question also, please. When you have time.
I just want to, sorry, I just want to quickly amplify that, but there's something I want to share with everybody. So when,
what's the problem? You want to comment something, or you want to ask something? What is the problem?
No, any problem. I want to put a question.
Okay.
okay, so I'll be very quick. Sorry. So no, I just want to share with you that, you know, in 1995-96, when we had started the ERC, as a young human rights researcher, I was going to different rural communities which were suffering from, you know, skinhead attacks, police violence, etc., etc., etc. Okay, and in the drawing rooms, I would find little shoeboxes full of rich artifacts from 100 years ago. In some cases, these were what we would call organic intellectuals who had preserved in catalogs and in shoeboxes and in their own way. And they're black and white photographs. And this is scattered across Europe, by the way, in Romani homes. So this is my main point, that this information, this knowledge has to be digitized. And this is knowledge within the Romani communities. These are artifacts of cultural memory. This rural network of organic intellectuals, Romani intellectuals, these intellectuals are actually reservoirs of knowledge on this. So I want to amplify both points here, that this partnership for both the Hungarian national project, but also the broader project from Heidelberg, that and partners, it really requires a lot of close working connections, and I'm thank you, Karola, for inviting everybody to join this project, because there's a lot out there which is not digitized, which is not archived, which is not there as yet in a kind of formal fashion. And I'm sure you know this. Finally, quick question about the lemma, nomadic. How would you substitute the term nomadic? Because if in the context of the Nazi persecution, you are talking about a systematic targeting of peripatetic, is that the word you want to use? No. Okay. No, so never ever. Because then you go into that whole debate. You feed into that whole debate about, okay, you are targeted because you are asocial, you are targeted because your family was wandering. I mean, yeah. So that's a question. And then really quick question for László.
Unfortunately, they cannot answer. So now you have put your questions, and we can discuss it during the coffee break.
Okay, fair enough.
Of the clock. This is the problem with the clock. Your very last question, and then we can discuss it in the coffee break. So I don't have any other solution. I didn't ask any. Just one of my questions.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I have a concern, because the last 10 years of my life in Romania, I wanted to demonstrate and to showcase that the Roma deportation to Transnistria was based on biopolitical thinking and on eugenics. And why I'm saying this? Because this issue influences very much the memory of the event. Okay? So, like it was suggested yesterday, also, we know that in Germany, in the late 80s, was recognized that the persecution of the Roma was made on racial criteria. We had the same thing in Romania. Okay? So my question is that do the researchers, especially those on from Romania, will take in consideration in this encyclopedia to explain, because I'm speaking on new archival funds that I discovered, let's say, with the term of the activist, if you want, because I don't. So this influenced very much the memory of the event. And why I'm saying this? Because I'm a sociologist, I'm not historian, but I like also to play, you know, with history. And why I'm saying this? Because if you go in a Roma community and you will ask why you were deported, or why your family was deported, or why the Roma from this community they were deported, people will say something like this. Because, you know, a Roma guy, he stole a chicken from a Romanian peasant, and this was the reason for which we were deported in time. Okay? So what I want to say is that the way in which the government framed the Roma persecution in Romania influenced the way in which the Roma internalized the memory of the event and also the society. And in the moment when the historians don't take in consideration these aspects of eugenics, of biopolitics, and put the deportation only on the reasons of social criteria, I think that this puts us again in the place of second-hand victims, like we were framed last days in Romania by a very important also historian. That he was the vice president of the museum of the Holocaust from United States. So this is my question, and if it is not clear, I can repeat.
No,
we'll do
it's absolutely, I think it's extremely important. Absolutely important. My proposal is to start the coffee break facultatively. So if you want, you can stay here and discuss this topic. No, Aggie, I don't want to close the discussion. So if you need to discuss it, they have 15 minutes here in this place. And if you want to go outside and drink a coffee, it's also possible. So the discussion can continue if you want here in this place or during the coffee break, because I see that there is something to discuss. So thank you so much. And please continue here or